Hello and welcome to today's Fairygodboss live webinar. We're so excited to have you all join us and we're going to give everyone a few minutes to kind of connect. But while we're waiting, if you have not already, we'd love to know where everyone is tuning in from today. So you'll see on the right side of your screen that there's a chat box. So if you feel comfortable doing so, please send a message in the chat saying, hey, and let us know where you're joining from. Let's see who I see so far. I see people from Chicago, Arizona, Los Angeles, Jersey, New York, Houston, Texas, Westchester, San Diego. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. We still want to learn. Oh, we have someone from Idaho and Toronto and Cincinnati. Very good. Love to see it. So, um, let's go ahead and get started. Why don't we? First, I'd like to introduce myself. You'll be hearing a lot from me. I am Darcy Brown, and I'm the Senior Director of DEI Partnerships at ServiceNow. Now, before we get started, I have a few kind of housekeeping notes. Now, just so you know, today's session will be recorded and it will be shared with all registered participants. Now, during the discussion, we'd like to hear from you. So we hope that you will use the stage chat function on the right side of your screen to send messages, comments, and questions to the panelists, as well as speak to each other. So now let's get to why we're here and kick off today's event, Pathways for Growth, Empowering Women Through Career Pivots and Support, hosted by ServiceNow. For those of you who do not know, Fairygodboss is the largest career community for women. Millions of women visit Fairygodboss for career connections, jobs, community advice, hard to find intel about companies, about how companies treat women, and virtual events like this that we were here for today. I am thrilled to be joined by three of my amazing ServiceNow colleagues, Sarah Tilley, Maria Gabrielle Wechter, and Tony Manchik. Would you each take a minute to introduce yourselves, please? We'd love to hear what's going on in your life personally, professionally, and what you do during the day at ServiceNow. Sarah, let's start with you.
Thanks, Darcy. So Sarah Tilley, I lead the global talent function for ServiceNow, which includes everything from recruiting to once you're an employee of ServiceNow, how do we help you lead, grow, develop, and obtain new skills, experience, knowledge to reach your career aspirations.
Thank you, Sarah. Maria, please introduce yourself and share what you do at ServiceNow.
Hello, everybody. I have been a ServiceNow developer for 6 years, but I joined ServiceNow, the company, back in January. I'm an outbound product manager, and it's my job to help everybody learn how to use theming, next experience, and drive adoption for my products.
Wonderful. Tony, please introduce yourself and share your role.
Hello, everyone. I'm coming to you today from Denver, from my mom's house, where I grew up, but normally I come to you from Portland, Oregon, where I've worked remotely since 2005. I came to ServiceNow 5.5 years ago to lead the documentation team, but apropos to the topic, last November, I assumed a new role. So I'm now Senior Director of Customer Content Strategy. And what that means is that I work across a lot of organizations that create content to make our customers successful and work to make sure that that content works seamlessly together to help our customers be successful. I'm also a really active DEI advocate. So I've been involved with the Pride group here since I came, and I'm the current co-chair of the Global Pride group.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all. And I am so excited to talk about our discussion today. And for those of you who are tuning in, please remember that everyone that will be answering questions that come directly from all of you. So please submit your questions in the chat box on the right of your screen, and we will do our very best to respond to as many questions as we can through our discussion. So let's begin at the beginning. Would love to hear about everyone's career journey. Since we are really kind of focusing on the art of the pivot, I personally am what I call a recovering PR professional who found her way into DEI and strategic partnerships, have always had partnerships throughout my career, and it just seemed to be a natural evolution. So, ladies, let's kind of talk through where you started your journey, and what were some of your previous roles and experiences. And I also will have a caveat for Maria and Tony. I'd like to know what motivated you to make your career change and pivot into your role. And finally, Sarah, I want to know how you went about building relationships and establishing credibility as a leader in the industry or company or within your new roles. So let's start with Maria.
Awesome. So actually, I come from a non-technical role. Back in high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. We moved halfway through my senior year, and I was basically doing all art classes. My dad forced me to apply to college, and we actually had a very weird fight where he wanted me to go to art school, and I said, "No, Dad, I want to make money. I can't go to art school." So that was weird. I ended up dropping out because of a car accident, and I started working as a waitress. I became a bank teller, and then I did tier one tech support. I ended up getting a tier two tech support job by telling my boss when he asked me, "Why should I even consider you for this role? You have no experience." I told him about how I saved $350 by going on YouTube, going to the dump, pulling a piece out of a dump car, fixing my car, and then teaching myself how to fix all of that. Then I became a ServiceNow administrator when I joked with him again about not having to hire somebody. I'll just figure it out. 3 months later, I had my ServiceNow certified system administrator certification, and I was in this wonderful world and community. I've always focused on moving forward and finding better opportunities. Something that I never say in interviews is that I also applied to new places to escape toxic environments. So I think it's really important to find a place where you can have great work-life balance and not feel like you want to escape every single day. Throughout my career, I got to start womennow.sn. I became a developer MVP, and I created enablement materials to help others get started in the industry and learn how to become admins, developers, which ended up sparking a passion in me. And that's how I became an outbound product manager here.
Wow, it's a great story. Tony, how about you?
Yeah, well, that is an amazing story. So thank you for sharing that. Like Maria, I didn't start out like if you had asked me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I never would have imagined I'd be in tech. I started out after college as wanting to be an academic. Well, not wanting to be an academic, wanting to get my PhD so that I could teach. I knew that I wanted to teach, and the PhD was the means to the end of being able to teach college literature and writing. It was kind of a fluke that while I was in graduate school in Santa Barbara, tough place to live on a graduate school salary, I took a part-time proofreading job at a tech company that in very short order turned into a tech writing job that turned into a series of full-time jobs. A lot of them were first jobs. So the first information architect in the department, the first data evangelist at ADP, and then eventually came to ServiceNow. So that was a pretty significant pivot. And then I also had a pretty significant pivot in the last year as well, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But what I would say about that, even though it feels like there's some pretty significant pivots, I can also see a theme, right? I can see a theme around wanting to help people develop and grow. And so even when I left academia, I kept teaching on the side. So I taught what I was doing. I taught in a graduate technical communication program. And then when I stopped doing that, I started teaching a lot of, doing a lot of webinars and speaking at a lot of conferences to kind of scratch that itch around teaching. And then last year, I went and got my coaching certificate, which is giving me opportunities to kind of continue to nourish in whatever leadership role then I'm in. To the second part of your question about what motivated those changes, though, those big pivots, the big pivot from academia to tech, or the one from a big org leadership role where I was leading a team of 160 people to one where I work across at a strategic level, much different type of role and a different type of the business. I'll be honest that neither one of them were that intentional, right? And so I think it's really important to acknowledge that not every pivot is going to be because you have this clear aha moment that you want to do something different. Sometimes it may, and it might even be unwelcome, right? It might be a layoff. It might be you realize there's lack of mobility in your current role. It might be, and so the trick, I think, is really to see opportunity, even if it's not something that you kind of initiate yourself. But the one thing that was common in all of my pivots is that I realized that I wasn't 100% engaged or challenged anymore in what I was doing. With academia, I had zero passion for doing the PhD, none whatsoever. It was a means to an end. I could not get through it. I found this other thing by chance in technology, really went with that. With this last pivot, again, I just realized through some changes in org structure and some other things that I was ready for a new challenge, and I ended up, thankfully finding one that brought new things to learn, a new way of working, new teammates, new people to learn from, right? So the catalyst really in both cases was realizing that I wasn't completely engaged and fulfilled where I was.
Well, thank you. And Sarah?
Yeah, I loved hearing Maria and Tony about your journeys. So very interesting. Probably a little more interesting than mine, because I didn't know what I wanted to do after college. I thought maybe I would be a social worker or pursue something in the psychology field, but I stumbled into recruiting, and pretty much that was my career for many years, both in agencies and firms, and then moved in-house at Warner Brothers for almost 5 years. And then I moved to the Walt Disney Company, where I spent 16 and a half years eventually leading enterprise talent strategies. And I made the move to ServiceNow about a year and a half ago, which, Darcy, I think that kind of, plays into the second part of your question, which is how do you, build relationships, establish credibility when you're making an industry shift like this? And I can't say for sure that I've established credibility, but I'd like to think I've established some relationships. And it was a big change for me to go from the media and entertainment company to a very fast-paced enterprise software company. And I realized that I had so much to learn. While I knew, how in a lot of ways I felt like I knew the fundamentals of building a talent strategy and how that would translate into any organization, there are things that I had to learn, and I'm still learning every single day. So for me, it's about listening and learning. That's how you build trust, is, acknowledging what you don't know. And also as a leader, understanding the team that you've become a part of, growing your team in the right way, but figuring out what are the members of your team good at, what are they interested in, and how do you both hire and nurture the best talent who genuinely understand that you care about their experience, you care about their career aspirations, and they feel supported and can grow and do their best work. And I think you really do have to understand your team members as whole people in order to establish real, authentic relationships. I think that's the trust piece. And then you learn from everyone that you can. And that's the credibility piece. And I feel like I had to really push myself to not, feel pressured to rush in and try to add value or change things. I think that comes after the trust and the credibility. So.
Well, thank you. First, Sarah, you have established credibility and you've built very strong relationships. And ladies, I echo the sentiment that's in the chat. Loved hearing your story. So thank you for sharing that with us. Now, my next question is, um, how did you make your transitions? And what have you found most effective in identifying and pursuing new opportunities? Was it people? Was it programs? Was it skills? Or was there some other method? This time, I'd like to start with Tony.
Yeah, so I'm going to cheat and say all of the above and then some. But I will try to will it down to 4 things that were key to me. And I think it's important for me to tell you that I also took a leave of absence right around the time I was making a pivot, which is really key to my first point, which is the first thing I did was create space to take time to evaluate and reassess, right? To really understand what I was feeling, why I was feeling disengaged, what inspires me, to think about what fulfills me, to think back to times when I felt really in flow, right? Where I felt really energized and try to isolate the why. And to ask myself, how do I get more of that? Right. But you have to create space to do that work, to really take the time to do that. The second was then articulating what's most important, right? I don't know about you all, but there are lots of things I'm interested in, right? There are lots of things I could even see myself doing, but I really needed to prioritize what was most important based on what I had just learned, in order to avoid kind of a shiny toy jumping to something. I really wanted to be very intentional about this last pivot. The third thing I did was use my people, right? So I began talking to trusted confidants really early about what I was feeling, what I was thinking, not in an explicit networking way. It wasn't like, do you know of any opportunities? It was more just getting some feedback, getting some perspectives, and then having patience. I didn't realize it, and I'll talk more about this a little later, but I didn't realize, but I laid the seed for my next job maybe a year before it came to fruition. And so, having patience, and kind of trusting that process and being really honest about what matters.
Well, thank you. Maria, would love to hear about you.
So my approach was very similar to Tony's with a slightly different twist. So the number one thing is that you just have to do it. There's this super smart philosopher of our time, Shia LaBeouf, and he's got a video where he tells you to just do it, and you should look it up. It's amazing. I say that to myself every morning when I wake up. I stopped doubting myself, or I at least pretended I didn't doubt myself. I ignored that ugly side of my brain. And I just moved forward. I applied to every job that I wasn't qualified for. And any job that I got interviews for, I always told them that the number one thing is that my ability is to learn. I don't have the technology background, and there's a million people who can code better than I can, but I'll be the one who can resolve the problems, and I'll be the one who can find the solutions when everybody else gets stuck. And if I get stuck, you know what I have? Community. So that is the number one most important thing for me. I have found all of my jobs through community, people I have met through making stickers, making this is kind of the talking about Tony using her people. This is how I met my people. I made funny pictures in our sndevs.com Slack, and people started knowing me as the funny pictures girl. I gave away stickers at Knowledge 2018, and I became known as the stickers girl. And now I met so many people that are in the chat, amazing people. And that this is to specifically answer Ashley's questions. The best way to build relationships while working remotely, send funny pictures and make friends. That is how I've gotten all of my jobs, quite literally. SNDevs.com, Now Learning was an amazing tool for me. Learning and again, the community.
Wonderful. Now, Sarah, I'm going to throw a little spin here because Kim put in a chat and asked the question about, upskilling and pivots. And when we start thinking about skills and competencies needed for the future, especially given the changing work environment, um, how would you recommend people start thinking about areas to do their upskilling in?
Yeah, I do think I saw Kim's question too. I think that the first step is to figuring out what skills you need is to really understand what skills you have. So it's about taking your experience and breaking it down into a set of things that you can do, you can do. So I think it's you can even start by asking yourself, like, what are the things that I do on a daily basis, on a regular basis, to help ensure that my work is productive. I think, Maria, your example like shows that you've got creative skills, so I think uh both from Tony and Maria, like the ability to quickly learn new things, that's a skill. Being highly organized, being able to take something complex and articulate it in a simple way, like just anything and everything you can think about in terms of what your skills are, so that you can articulate to yourself, really, to start, what makes you successful. And then I think it is okay if we think more broadly about the skills and competencies that are needed for the future. I think that there's some things that are universal. Like I do believe that like for what I've seen and what I've experienced and what I've researched too, there's a whole lot around like being empathetic and also being truthful, which requires the truthfulness, especially requires courage. So I think courage, I think being highly collaborative. I think the days of just being able to, for the most part, there are some roles that operate differently, but a lot of roles, it's not like the experience that we have in school where you sit behind a desk, or you sit behind your computer, you produce something, you hand it in, you get a grade. Now the expectation is that you're co-creating, you're collaborating, you're iterating on things together. So I think that is going to be a skill that's going to help in any role, any career path. And I think the other is really a focus on the in value to whatever consumer or customer your company is serving, all with a very digital mindset, moving away from the analog ways of doing things. So I think those are kind of some of the, if we just talk about general skills and capabilities needed moving forward, I think, again, these are all things that are emerging themes when we talk about talent trends. And I think that in terms of, the question of like, what are the skills that you need to obtain in order to get the job that you want? We're very fortunate that we're well on a path to something that sounds maybe kind of HR for those of you not in HR. It's called a skills intelligence strategy, which is basically using AI to help break down a set of skills and into career corridors or career paths, and help people more easily match up to that. That's the journey we're on at ServiceNow. But I think ultimately it is about understanding, okay, these are the skills I have today. What are the skills needed to move into this industry or to move into this job? And then there's a whole lot that's available that will help you then understand, okay, then what do I need to obtain those skills? Like Maria's, your story about, okay, I'm just going to learn how to administer on the ServiceNow platform, right? So you had to figure out what is it that I need to do in order to be able to successfully do that. So it could be something technical like that, or it could be, all right, I need a mentor that's going to help me better understand how to verbalize a dissenting point of view, whatever it may be, a soft skill or a technical skill. And so I think it is, again, what are the skills you have? What are the skills you need to have in order to advance or try something new? That's really what I've seen. I hope that answered your question, Darcy.
It did 100%. And I'm going to tap you again because Christina has a question for you, wanting to know what advice you would have for people who are looking to enter the field of talent development.
Well, I think the conversation we were just having is probably very helpful. I think that it's really understanding, what specifically. So if we think about talent development, there is a range of things like, okay, what are the specific needs of someone who's very early in their career? They might need more help in like, okay, this is kind of office norms if you spend some of your time in office, right? Like it could be that fundamental. So there's specific needs for people that are early in their career. There's specific needs that might span across an entire, employee base within a company. So that might be, okay, what are enterprise learning strategies to something that's highly customized or specialized for senior leaders, whether that be exec coaching or any type of immersive experience. So I think it's like understand what it is that makes up, kind of the talent development function. And then this would be advice, right? Plug in talent development, plug in anything, talk to people who do that and understand, okay, help me like really be able to speak to the ins and outs of that role, of that work. And so that I can understand how to translate what I do have right into that. So again, some of those things that we're talking about, how do you take your experience and break it down into a set of skills? There is likely things that anyone has done that can translate into the field of talent development. So understanding how to speak to that, starting to make connections. And then of course, there's always like the formal courses, et cetera, that are available out there. But I think that's the initial advice that comes to mind.
Wonderful. Thank you. Now, we have another question, also from Christina. What guidance can you offer for individuals seeking to change others' perceptions of them, especially when their title might lead to misjudgments? For context, Christina began her career in HR. She took a pivot to an EA role at her last company after her last company closed unexpectedly. And unfortunately, her current company does not provide development opportunities for individual contributors. And it's making the thought of changing careers without support from her organization daunting. Who would like to take that question on? Okay. I was going to go ahead, Tony.
Once. I'll take a stab, right? So a great question. And I think I'm sure we've all dealt with versions of this question before, right? Particularly if we feel like we're, being defined by our resume or our LinkedIn profile. My personal thought, I'm not sure I would have said this 15 years ago when I was a little bit more of a rule follower, but is to make sure your LinkedIn profile tells your story and tells what those skills, right? Like Sarah was just doing a great job of teasing out what are the skills of what you do, regardless of your title, right? Whether you have an HR title or an EA title or another title, what are the core skills? There's a lot of overlap there, right? There are skills you developed as an EA that would be totally relevant to an HR job, right? So to really try to tell that story, make your LinkedIn header about what you want to be or what you think your core value is, not a job title, right? Maria, creative, self-educating, right? Like whatever, right? Like whatever, make that title, especially how you see yourself and how you want people to see yourself. That would be my first suggestion.
I would love to jump in. One of the things I would recommend for Christina is go for it. Many times us as women, we want to make sure we have all the boxes checked, that we have every skill that is written out in that job description, but sometimes you need to pause to get ready for that pivot and recognize what's transferable. Although you don't have the exact title that you think people may be looking for, you may have very true and real transferable skills. Go for it. Go for it. The worst thing that can happen is that they can tell you no, and that provides you an opportunity to request feedback. And then you know what you need to tighten up, what you need to strengthen, so that if this is a role that you are truly interested in and something that you really want to do, you'll be better prepared for the next time that you apply. So let me go, because I see that there's another question in the chat, but I want to get to one of the questions that we have, which happens to be one of my favorite questions, and things that I love to talk about. And is talking about mentorship and sponsorships. So we often hear about the role of mentors and the roles that mentors and sponsors can play in supporting and advocating your career advancement. Research shows that sponsorships are game changers for women to advance in their careers. For context, mentors can commonly be defined as people who provide career tips and guidance, whereas sponsors tend to be senior level members of leadership teams who use their influence and networks to promote their proteges directly by using their influence and connecting them to high profile assignments, people, pay, and promotions. Now, before I pose the question, I do want to kind of put a caveat out there. Please understand that your mentors can be not only people that are in a higher position than you, but they can also be people that are more junior in your career. I happen to have someone on the call that I consider a mentor. She's more junior than I may be, but our conversations, I learned so much from her and I appreciate it. I also grabbed a mentor, and Sarah probably doesn't realize that I've, deemed her one of my mentors, but now she knows. But it truly helps, and it helps you grow your career. So, Tony, can you or would you be willing to share a specific example of when a sponsor influenced a pivotal moment in your career?
Yeah, I'd love to. And I just want to make one quick add on to what you said. First of all, it's an illusion that the mentor mentee relationship is one directional too. So, in addition to the junior senior thing, your mentor is getting value from those conversations too, right? So, but I love this question, right? One of the things I did during my last pivot was I also took some time to get trained as a certified coach. So I've thought a lot about mentoring, coaching, sponsoring, and I think this is such an critical question. And the other important thing to know is that these are not mutually exclusive categories. They're just different in terms of the action, right? So a mentor is somebody taking time to talk with you and sharing their experience and in ways that are relevant to what you're dealing with. Coaching is very much about helping you elicit your own insights. Sponsorship is somebody who puts some skin in the game, uses their experience, influence, network, whatever, to really sponsor you toward something, whether it's a learning opportunity, a speaking opportunity, a job, whatever that is. So let me tell you a story that really illustrates how these all came together for me. In the fall of 2020, my job changed significantly. I had been leading a big organization. We brought in a VP, so my job changed a lot. And by the spring of the following year, I was, as I mentioned earlier, I was ready for change, right? Because the new role was a little smaller, wanted a new challenge. And as I started realizing that, I began talking to confidants, mentors, coaches within and outside of ServiceNow, just to get feedback, to help sort out my own thinking, figure out what steps I could take. And those were very much mentoring and coaching conversations. But what I didn't realize, one outcome of that is I took a leave of absence to work on some things personally and for my family as well. But another outcome was that one of my mentors actually started acting as a sponsor, and I didn't even know it. So she set into motion some conversations, including while I was out on leave. Before I went out on leave, those conversations involved me talking to one of her peers about how I might help solve some of his business problems. That didn't end up panning out, but it was still expanding my network, and it was still an active sponsorship. And then when, while I was out, this person saw an opportunity for a new role to meet a business need that she thought I would also be good for. And so even though I wasn't even working, right, like I was out on leave, right, like she was advocating for me. And in fact, ended up calling me a few weeks before my leave was over to talk about, possibly creating this role. And, so I think it's really safe to say, I certainly wouldn't be in the role I'm in if it hadn't been for that sponsor. I might not even be at ServiceNow, right? So that person had a huge impact. But a couple really important things to note. I never reported to this person, right? Like, I knew her from work we had done together on Pride, right? And she had started sponsoring me before I had even reached out to her for coaching. So 2 years ago, she nominated for me to speak at the Women's Regatta in Seattle just because of what she had seen in me. So I want to encourage everybody. I know we're maybe focusing on this about how we can get mentors and sponsors and coaches, but we all also have power to sponsor people. And it could be the smallest thing, right? Like it could be seeing a conference that one of your peers would be a really good speaker for, and nominating that person, right? So we can sponsor each other, and we all know that that's really important for women. So that's my story.
Wonderful, thank you. So since we're still on that topic, Sarah, would you share your thoughts on the role a mentor can have on career growth and development?
Sure. And I feel like, Tony, you touched a little bit on this when you were sort of talking about the difference between a mentor and a coach and a sponsor. I thought you articulated that really well. And I think a mentor can be a real growth enabler if you, I believe, if you actually really commit to learning through their experiences, which I feel like sounds super obvious, but I think I look back and I think about the times where I had opportunities to actually learn from someone else's mistakes versus having to make all of them myself. And I didn't always take advantage of that. Some of them I just had to make myself, and maybe that's true for some things, but I think that, there's also on the flip side of that, right? All the great advice and about things that work, right? That you don't have to figure out yourself. And I think just, it's something I wish that I could, force my children to do too, which is like, how do you learn from others versus having to experience it firsthand. And so I think, a mentorship, you bring real situations to the discussion, you bring real aspirations. And then, I feel like I've definitely been part of conversations over the course of my career where it's gone in one ear, it's gone out the other, or I haven't really been committed to, putting into motion like what they've shared. And the better I've gotten at that, the better that I've gotten at yielding their experiences for my own learnings and for my own aspirations, I think the better. I think they also, of course, just good advice on how to grow your network and how to, articulate your aspirations in the right way and how to navigate conversations. So, it's something we at ServiceNow, of course, have heard a lot of interest in from our employees and leaders, even up to the leadership level. And we, it's and we're making more of it, right? But I think just from a practical sense, that's the advice I'd give, are the things that come to mind.
Wonderful, thank you. Want to pivot See, I'm playing on that. To a question from Nina, who wants to know how she can better advocate for herself with transferable skills based on her background and where she's kind of looking to pivot into a different industry. So, any advice, Maria? You've been a little quiet on, how to possibly advocate and play up the transferable skills in which she has.
So this is a great question. I personally heavily rely on a community like the Women Now private Slack channel to kind of temper my responses to these types of situations, because very often I can find that I am a very aggressive person when it comes to advocating for others and myself. So maybe I would like some other opinions in here to kind of temper my own opinion. But honestly, I think that's the most important thing, because technology comes and goes, and what you are learning are what I always focus on myself is learning how to learn and learning how to adapt. And those are the things that I mostly emphasize in my interviews, in my resume. Um, I make sure to communicate that I am not necessarily sometimes a connotation of a jack of all trades can be seen as negative, but I try to spin it into as strong of a positive as possible, so people understand that when they hire me, they're hiring more than just me, they're hiring my potential. And I just fight for it, and I'm very aggressive about it, and I don't stop. That's the most important thing, is literally do not stop, because nobody else is going to do this for you.
Very good and very strong point. Persistence and tenacity pays off. So, kind of staying on the same vein within the mentorship discussion, Tony, want to kind of pick your brain about some of the tips on how to best maximize your time with your mentor and your mentee. Each one plays a role, and I think Sarah kind of started touching on it about, there's work that a mentee needs to do prior to meeting with the mentor, because you need to make sure you're ready when you go into those rooms for those conversations, as well as work that the mentor needs to kind of do, maybe post meeting, based on the conversations with the mentee. So, Tony, can you just delve a little deeper into how to best maximize that time?
Yeah, I'd like to start by building on what Sarah said, right? Which is to really be aware of the potential knowledge you have to gain from the mentor, a lot of which is based on their experience, right? So don't be afraid to ask questions about, have you had this experience, or how have you handled, right? Because that's what makes mentors different than coaches or even bosses, right? Like, because that's the whole premise, right? Is to learn from their experience, or as Sarah put it so elegantly, right? To maybe not repeat all the, to get the benefit of the learnings without having to repeat all the mistakes yourself. But the other thing I would say, and I'm borrowing from my coach training here, is to just be very intentional about how you're going to use the time. If it's 25 minutes or if it's 45 minutes, doesn't matter. Make sure you go into each session with, as a mentee, with what you want to focus on that day, right? Like, it's really easy to think, oh gosh, Sarah's got such great experience and there's so much I could learn to her. I just don't even know where to start. But to think about what you need in the moment, and it might even be something based on what happened that week, right? Like, what would be most useful to you that you want to focus on? And beyond that general area, what is reasonable to take away in 25 minutes or 45 minutes? Try to set some sort of internal success metric of something actionable you'd like to take away, so that you be uber focused. If I'm a mentor, I do the same thing. I start every session by saying 3 things. This is your time, mentee, my mentorship partner. This is your time everything we talk about here is confidential. And what would you like to focus on? And when I say that focus question, I say both generally, but also what would you like us to achieve? Would you like to leave today with a list? Would you like to leave today with a set of names? Would you like to leave today with me having an action item to connect you with somebody? Whatever it is, right? It can be any number of things. It might even be, I really don't know. What I would like to leave with is a sense of 3 possible paths I might take, right? Like it may be more general or more vague or more concrete, but having a sense of what you're to accomplish really helps, both parties stay uber focused and really make the meetings actionable.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'm going to kind of merge a couple of questions, one that I have and one that I kind of see Mary has in the chat. So we talked about transferable skills. We talked about pivots. We talked about mentoring. If we would kind of talk in generalities, what is some advice you would give to someone who's stuck in their current career path and is considering making a change? Let's start with Maria.
So y'all remember that thing I said earlier with the just do it? Just do it. And you always have to do the hand signal too, okay? It's very important for your inner energy for you to do the hand signal. It kind of helps you get ready to just do it. But legitimately, nothing. I always, in my mind, have the thought of if they at least give me an interview, I know I can make them remember me. And whether that's by saying that I learned how to do programming by modding Minecraft servers, or I fixed my car and saved $350 by going on YouTube, you got to find the thing that makes you you and really just hit them in the face with it, basically. And don't stop. If you feel like you're maybe not ready for a career change yet, but you're interested, apply for jobs. If you get an interview, that's fantastic practice. You're never going to get better at interviewing unless you do it and mess up. Like Sarah said, though, learning from others' experiences is great. Don't get me wrong. But I have made so many mistakes in so many interviews. I can't even begin to tell y'all. It keeps me up at night. But just get out there and do it. Nothing's stopping you, just yourself.
Wonderful. Tony.
I do feel compelled just to jump in on that because Maria, I think that's just great advice. And I'll tell you, I've been on, most of the time I'm the one who's on this side of the table helping to drive an interview process. But, as I started to think about a career move, it was very humbling for me to be the one being interviewed. And I would talk to people and say, people would be surprised if I said, I don't know if I did so well in that interview, but I think, just allowing yourself to let it go and, because we can internalize that stuff a whole lot. And sometimes maybe we could have done better in an interview, but I honestly very rarely see someone who manages an interview perfectly. We're human beings talking to other human beings, but I think oftentimes there's just a reason why that wasn't the right move or the right job for you, and just to let it go and not get in your head, because it can start to knock your confidence. And I agree with you, Maria. So if that happens, then you're less inclined to just do it more. But it's like, if you're looking for your next job, just view it all as a practice trial run, until you find the one.
That's great advice. Thank you. Tony, let's hear from you.
I just +1 to both of those comments. And I'm finding myself realizing that my advice at this stage in my career is a lot different than the advice I would have given 20 years ago. But I think what Maria and Sarah both made me realize is that it's probably because I would venture to guess a lot of us put too much pressure on each individual interview. It's like, if I don't get a call back, I have failed in somehow. But as Sarah pointed out, not every job is the right job. And sometimes not getting that call back may be a favor to you that you don't even know about. And for a number of reasons. Could be because it wasn't the right match, right? Like, and just own your own confidence, right? Like, I didn't get that job. I don't know what that means, but it doesn't mean anything about me, right? Doesn't mean I have fewer skills than I had when I went in the door. It doesn't mean, like I think about that transferable question about Pepsi and the pharma versus, and part of me, I get it. I can see myself as a hiring manager asking that because I would want the candidate to be able to articulate something about transferable skills and say, well, yeah, the way I look at it, I serve customers there. I need to identify their needs. The same thing is here. Yes, I'll need to learn things about the industry, but there are a lot of keyword of the day, transferable skills, right? But there's part of me that's also like, if I went through that spiel and the interviewer seemed unimpressed, at this stage in my career, I'm going to think, okay, if that interviewer can't see how all this experience I just shared with him would be useful, this isn't the right job.
100%. And something super important that I want to emphasize for those in the chat, I have the self-esteem of a cucumber. The self-loathing going on in my head is so strong that it's hard to wake up some days. But you just fake it until one day you love yourself. I'm not there yet, but we'll get there together, y'all.
100%. Okay, so now I'm about to throw a little wrench in this because there's 2 more questions I want to get through, and I want to kind of have some lightning responses so we can do this. Okay, so first, Fairygodboss has a tradition of asking its panelists the following: what have you observed that women do not feel comfortable enough bragging or taking ownership of? All the amazing things that they achieve. Can you share with the audience an accomplishment, whether it's personal or professional, that you're most proud of? And I want to kind of get through these rather quickly.
All right, I'll jump in with a quick one. The quick ones for me are usually not about, don't tell my boss, business value. They're about impact to people. And the one that I'll call out because it was very recent is not even related to my day job, but it's that ServiceNow just sponsored a local municipal pride for the first time. And we had 200 people out there in San Diego showing our colors and creating community for our LGBTQ folks and letting folks know that ServiceNow is a great place for them to work.
Wonderful. Maria, how about you?
Like I said earlier, I'm not shy about my struggles with mental health, and I try to overshare so everybody feels comfortable sharing too. But there is one thing that happened at Knowledge this year, and it was this woman who came up to me and she told me that in January, she had become a developer and made a career switch thanks to a speech that I gave at the previous Knowledge. And y'all, I started sobbing my eyeballs out. Like, I struggle to like myself on a good day. And sometimes I feel like if I can look at myself through her eyes, I could like me. And I'm just so proud of her and what she's accomplished. And that kind of makes me feel very happy.
Wonderful. Sarah, how about you?
You should be proud of that, Maria. I love this question because I've seen this phenomenon with women throughout my recruiting career. When I literally can see the difference, not always, but for the most part, with how women talk about their accomplishments and their, strengths versus men. And I think it can take a little bit of reprogramming for some of us to be comfortable saying, you know what, like, I am really proud of this. I'm proud of what I'm capable of. And let me tell you how I've succeeded in every job that I've had. I actually, interestingly, was listening to a podcast with Mark Cuban on it this morning, who I'm a fan of, but I just thought, now that is a man who does not even pretend to exhibit humbleness, and I was like, there's something to be learned in that approach. The pendulum swings, far the other way. But I do think, like, I'm very proud that I've been given more opportunities to contribute in every job that I've had. I come in and my scope increases based on what I've been able to achieve, and doing that with a team mentality, I think has really been big, but making a move, as I mentioned before, into enterprise software was a big leap for me. I feel really proud of what my team and I have done to elevate the talent function in the last year and a half. And I'm gonna say that, proudly. So.
As you should. And I loved all of your responses. I know that I'm guilty of that in my previous role in PR. I did an amazing job amplifying what other leaders did and highlighting all of that. But I have a tendency to kind of downplay what I bring to the table, who I am, and I am actively working on trying to do better with that. So, last lightning round question. Failing fast means to be open to experimentation or taking on the unknown and be willing to pivot quickly when you fail. Talk about quickly an instance where you failed fast in your career and what did you learn? Start with Tony.
Yeah. So what I learned, I'll start with that, is that failing fast often really involves a decision to cut your losses, right? Like you have to make that decision. I think sometimes we feel like we shouldn't quit, so we continue working on something just before we started. In my case, our organization had invested a lot of research in designing and redesigning a website. And then we got some feedback that it really wasn't going to land well. And so we aborted. And it was really hard because we felt we'd invested all of this and it was going to be sunk cost, but it would have been the wrong thing to launch it. Right. So being willing to cut your losses and realize when it's okay, take what we learned from it, what we learned about the order in which we should do things, and move on.
All right, Sarah.
I was thinking about a leader that I had, a number of years ago. It was a new job, and I was given, an assignment, and I produced it, and he just redlined the heck out of it. It was just like each page more red lines than the last, and I thought, well, okay, I just massively failed that assignment. But what I realized pretty quickly was that he expected to always iterate on anything that I brought, that it was going to be something that we would edit and improve together, that I should never expect to come with a fully baked, completely perfect, product. And I think, again, this kind of ties into the conversation we're having about as women, what we do in our heads, right? It's like, okay, well, I had to quickly shift from thinking I failed into thinking, okay, actually more input from people that I trust and that I respect is going to make my whatever fill in the blank solution, product, presentation better. And so that's one of the things that came to mind.
Wonderful. Maria.
So this is actually a concept that I wasn't very familiar with before this question, and I learned a lot from Tony and Sarah's take on this because I very stubbornly try to make things work way too much. So I'm looking forward to, in the future, being able to fail fast and not struggle as hard as I tend to. Because, you just got to prove yourself as a woman, right?
But I think there's something to be said, Maria, with sticking to your guns and being convicted about something, so that is a skill. That is a strength.
But then there's stubbornness, just sheer stubbornness.
Yeah. The balance, I feel like, is what is our life journey. But I do think that there's a lot of positive in that attribute.
Yeah, I do think I have to say it's all highly situational, right? Like not every circumstance it's okay to, say, well, we're going to fail fast on this, right? Like there are lots of situational aspects. And I did just see something on a blog or LinkedIn somewhere recently about our attitudes towards failure. And I do think a good thing over the last, several years is that there is more talk about being, more forgiving about failure. But this article was like, there are limits to that too, right? Like that doesn't mean we should excuse failure based on, lack of effort or lack of preparation, right? But yeah, we're not always going to get everything right. And part of being a leader and part of growing our careers is taking those leaps of faith. And sometimes the leaps are gonna fail.
Well, Sarah, Maria, Tony, thank you so much. I know I've learned a lot. I hope our audience has learned a lot. And I would love to thank all of you all who have joined us today. You three have provided phenomenal advice. And as a reminder, for all of those of you who have registered, the recording will be sent out today, along with additional resources to learn more about opportunities at ServiceNow. So please do not hesitate to go and check out our amazing career site. In the meantime, be sure to check out ServiceNow's profile and jobs on Fairygodboss. Also, we would love to hear your feedback to help us improve future events. So please head to the Typeform tab on the right side of your screen to share your thoughts in a 1-minute survey. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks to you, Darcy, too.
Yes.
Thank you.